Hey people, it's Father's Day 2026, and a lot of people believe that Noah is the father of all. And I talked a little bit about this in the last movie, but there's some dark truth about Noah that you don't know that was written out of King James. You know, in Genesis 9, right after the covenant with the sign of the rainbow was established, Noah and his sons went out of the ark, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And they always say, Ham was the father of Canaan. And these are sons that populated the whole earth. And so Noah began to be a farmer, and he planted a vineyard. He drank the wine and was drunk, and became uncovered in his tent. And Ham saw the nakedness of his father and told his brothers. So Shem and Japheth took a garment, put it on their shoulders, and walked backwards to cover the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away, and they did not see their father's nakedness. They didn't want to see what was up. So Noah woke from his wine, and he knew what his younger son had done to him. Well, his younger son saw him naked and told his brothers. And for that, the son of Ham was cursed to be his servant forever. And Shem was blessed, and Japheth was enlarged. But if you look at the Latin, the Greek, and the Hebrew, it'll tell you a little bit more about this. In the Hebrew, and awoke Noah from his wine, and he knew. And so this word, and he knew, this is and, vav, and I do. I-D-O, I do. And this is the same word when Adam knew Eve. Or in the New American Standard Version, it means had relations and knew his wife. And Cain knew his wife. He had relations with his wife. And Adam had relations with his wife. And knew his wife. And I do. And he had relations, and he knew what had done to him his son, the youngest. So what the hell did he do, is os. Os is sweet. It's has the work is where that comes from. It's where the word Moses comes from, and it's the work. And it's the same word used today for sugar. Sweet, dextrose, sucrose, all your oses are sugars. And what he did, what had relations, what he knew to was sweet love, L-U-V-N, the sweet loving weft, W-F-T-N or W-F-T-Z. Weft, when you have a weave going on, when you have a warp and a weft. A warp is the ones that are running up and down, and they're being warped back and forth, and you weft. The weft is the one that's being passed through. And os, and sweet loving weft is. And in the Latin, in the vigil, a vigil, V-I-G-I-L, is the night. Is something that happens at night is a vigil. And the vigilans, and the things that happen at night, autumn, what should, know. And Noah is a knower, and he knew his wife. Noah was a knower. He was a molester. He would screw in everything. He'd go get drunk and come home and screw his sons forever. Well, they caught him drunk and finally got him back, And Noah, it's vine, it's vino, it's wine. Noah, it's vine. And come didisice it. A Q-U, replace it with a W-H, and an A-E is, the A-S-E or the O-S-E. W-H-O-S-E. Whose a feaser at, whose ass at they file. Whose ass at they file. A feces is the shit, and a feaser, the shitter. And where's the shit at is your ass. The feaser at they file a sieve. So this second one reading is an IV. A file, a sieves us, a minor. And so a minor, it's younger, but also a minor is one that tunnels in, the minor. And the vigilans ought to know. He should know. And they say, let you know. You've been giving it to us. He's been blessing his sons all this time. They're going to feed it back to him. Ought him know. He should know about it too. And know his wine. And come assesses that. CISESET. Assesses that. Who's fesserat. He done figured out that somebody had done filled a pedophile, a file, the love, the filius sieves as minor. And in the Greek, you look up in line 23, and it's easier to see, that if he to do a naughty, the first A reads as a I, followed by the A, this one reads a I, N-O-T-I, and do a naughty oughtn't, what you should not do. And if he to do a naughty oughtn't, and the poor youth is on opus, usually he's on the poor youth, that on the kid. But here it's the opus to feigns, the other way around, feigns light. And you can see this word for the agricola. They'll interpret this as a husbandman, a farmer. But it comes from a Greek, all, and the A followed by the E, you add an S in there. A sexorcerum, a sexorcerum. And this word for the tent here, you go to the tabernacle. Well, your word tabernacle, it comes from tavern, Tavern, the tavern, and aculo. Aculo is the sting, a bee stinger, the wasp sting, the tavern of sting, the place where you get stung. The aculas, the thorn, spine, prickles, the stinger of scorpions. He done been stung by the scorpion. And so this Ham, father of Canaan, from the Egyptian, the Greek, the Hebrew, the first A, a double A, the first one reads as a yod, it's a J, and it's a change, the change on. Daddy gets drunk and he changes, and the champ adder change on. And so a potter, it comes from the Egyptian too. You have a pot and you have a top. The potter is the one on top, and the uke is the one on the bottom. And so when Noah got drunk, and who'd come vidis sees it. The vidi, to see. The vidis assess it. To see, assess it. The champ adder change on. Wherein the skill is set. The pot receive. The pot and re and S, the double S is an I, I-V. Receive. The receive is this. And new data. Some new numbers here. The nundi of it. The nundi of it. I will have none of that, The nundi of it. Do of us a frater, the brothers of the church, the fraters. And do of us the frater of a sieve, S-I-V. A sieve is for as. Your turn to be potter's turn to be a uke. Time to be on the bottom. At where a name, a shem, and yappeth to make fat, to enlarge. A pallium. A pallium is a badge of honor put on the pope, on the bishop. It's that little tie he wears around his neck. The imposer went humor, thought it funny, laughed. The humor receives, receive is. The humor receive is. And The incident is retrorsum. Retrorsum, is backwards of a ruer. Ruer is anal sex. The ruru, ancient word, same as the Indians use, the ru, up the ass, of the ruer went. Wherein the one on top, the potter, a sieve. And faces who? A whorum. Horrible, the terror in the face. The faces who whorum, a verse, change places, of verses hereon. Hereon the errand is wrong. And the potter is virila, and father's sexual organs, none vidorant. None saw, here went. And so, after Noah woke up and he's seen that who's been the up in my ass, the festered at the file was, and he says, aight. This is what a redneck says when somebody played a joke on him and he's fixing to get back. Aight, you motherfuckers, aight. Maledictus change on, the male, and this is a dictus, and that's where all your word, and he said, the dixit, and he said, and benedictus, and the good speech, is all comes from this dictus, and that means whoever has the dick has to say. And it's an old Greek thing, they get naked, they wrestle, and whoever wins was fixing a vigilance, should he know, it's wine, and come did he assess it, whose ass at of files. And he says, aight, maledictus change on, a service, and the S reading is an I here, your vorum, the service you see, hear it, the frauder in a sieve is, the brother in receive is, and the dixit who, Q-U-E who, and the dixit who benedictus, and they say this is bena is good, as in French bon voyage, good voyage, and bon good, the good speech, dominus, the one on top. You see that same word in the word for houses. The house, the ruler of the house, dominus, and they say this is Lord God. But the dominus dues is one to say is God, and it comes from the English word dew, and dew is, the perspiration that comes up on your pot when you're brewing something up, and it's the alcohol, the dews. And you can see that better in the Hebrew, Shem's blessing, here, the curse, and via, by way of Mr. Error, or backwards, the ruer, the one up in your ass, and via Mr. Error, you got this shit backwards, can as of do bid 'em, will be the servant, can as do bid 'em. And then to Shem, the one that blesses, and via by way of Mr. Brew, B-R-U, and a final K is a D. Same as the final N is a Z. Final K is a D. Looks like a D. Looks more like a D than a K. You see how the top of it leans over. And via Mr. by way Mr. Brood of the ale, the one that brewed this stuff up that got me drunk, brood of the ale-ism, the one that did the brewing, awaken as of Delmu. Waken as of Delmu. Delmu, you see all the Spanish places, and Dela, is to the, and Mu is high waters. Boy, you in high waters. You get in high waters. And via Mr. Brood of the aleism, the one that brewed the ale, awaken as of Dilmu to the high waters. And this means, you're living down in the valley. You're no longer up on the Giza Plateau. You're living down in the valley. You're a servant. So the Dixit who, W-H-E is who. Q is who's pointed at. The Dixit pointed at is who. And the Dixit who Benedictus, the domain, the house of, the domain was do and seem. S and the double S, was I-E-M. And it's like a S-E-E-M, seems it. The do seems it. And the Dixit who Benedictus domain was do seems it. The change on serve us the juice. And dilated, the second T reads as a D here. And they do that because if the word following begins with a D, then that would cause it to be an I. So they can use a T or a D, same thing. Same thing in Hebrew, Egyptian. You'll see in Egyptian the T and the D switch up. In Greek, it's all the same ancient language. And dilated, and your eyes are dilated and enlarged. God, Japheth is the way they interpret that. And dilated, do see fed. There's a lot of extra letters here, but a PH is a F or a Q, and a TH is a D, fed. And God enlarged Japheth and fed him, and dilated do see fed. It habited in a tavern of sting, in the bar room where you get stung when you get drunk, Acula. And the tavern Acula seems it who a change on service the Jews, the juice, the power, the justice. And so this sounds like a big old homosexual story, but it's actually talking about an eclipse and how the eclipses come at the end of a metatonic cycle. You'll see that in the Greek here when in 23 it says they walked backwards and they covered up the nakedness, and was of eclipson. And the tingum nose in. This nakedness is from the Geminis, and it comes from the word gym and the nose in. Everybody goes to the gym and they get naked and they work out. Then they go into the showers and they have their to a pot rose. And to a pot rose oughtn't, what you shouldn't do, and a top, the top rose upon, and oughtn't, what you should not have done, oughtn't, of opisto, backwards, opist of light, opist of fanes. And it's talking about when the moon turns red. You get an eclipse of the moon, and 15 days later you have an eclipse of the sun. And this is a story about how do you know when it's coming. And if you read all the Greek, you'll see it. They're talking about how they knew that the moon wasn't as large as the sun, because they could tell during the lunar eclipse. And the earth just does cover up the moon for a short period there. If the moon was the same size, it wouldn't fall in the shadow. But, opisto, in behind or in the back. And Phanes, that was the firstborn god. He was from the cosmic egg, and he was birthed from the chicken hatcher. And you'll find this in the Hebrew. The chicken hatcher is the serpent. But if you look at Phanes, you'll see that he has his magic wand, and he's pointing over here at the Gemini. And then his staff over here points at the fish and Scorpio, the sting. And he was the power, he was the juice. And he was androgynous. He went both ways, penis and vagina. And this ain't real big. Read up on it. It's a small page. And yeah, I know that they spell this with what they call a omega, but I promise you this omega sometimes reads as a E, just like all these other letters change up. But you see it like this twice, the Epistophanes, and you see it again here, was backwards. The episto was backwards, and the phanes, they kind of left that out. The backwards juice, the backwards power. But if you look in the Septuagint, you'll see it comes up the 2 times here, the Epistophanes. And the second time, they'll go ahead and give it this E here, Epistophanes, at the end here, ES. So my father also had 3 sons, and I was the youngest. But he never molested us, and I never molested him. But it was a common thing back in the day because everybody wanted to be like the heavens. The gods in the heavens, they were a bunch of queer, homo, androgynous beings. And the gods on earth, the kings, wanted to be just like the gods of heaven. And they thought that was the thing to do. Thus God made man in his likeness. He was the homos in. But he warned them, don't be the faggy in. You are not to fag in, or you will be the fags. And once you do this, it becomes in loop. It's passed down in loop to fag. Everybody sent their homosexual children to the church to cure them. And after a while, the whole church become homosexual. And that's who wrote the Bibles. The Latin, the Greek, the Hebrew. They were all fags that wrote this book. They're a lot more open-minded than us heterosexuals. They're not afraid to try some gay shit. They're not afraid to write about some gay shit. They're not afraid to think about it. Thus, their mind expanded quicker, and they rule the earth today. Get used to it. And this King James translation, this was just written in 1611, and it was created for the American experiment. Why do you think the Muslims want to kill all the Christians? The modern day Christians kidnapped. They stole the Bible from the homosexual community. Before 400 years ago, to be a Christian meant to be homosexual. It's ancient Greek word. You can find it 600 years before Christ. Christian was a word they say meant important. This is important. And it was the sign of the cross. You see that sign of the cross written beside a writing. And that meant, hey, this is important. And read it twice. So the sheep had kidnapped the book from the real Christians, which were all homos. Jesus hung out with 12 dudes. And when it says brotherly love, the word is agape. And agape means mouth wide open. You see it in the ancient art where the priest molested children. He's feeding them bread from his crotch. The Hebrew word was will come for bread. And anybody that thinks that Christianity is older than Islam, you're sheep that's been eating bread from the crotch. But in the book of 1 Kings 15, became King Abiam, the father of the oceans. And they used to put this information up here, but I got this damn Bible Hub. They're trying to destroy their page. They're removing all the information. They don't want anybody to know how to read this. They spent time and money to create this page, and they're trying to destroy it. Became King Abiam, and his mama was Mocha, and that's where your coffee comes from. That's down there in Saudi Arabia. And her father, she was the daughter of the father of Islam. And they used to tell you that this meant the father of peace. But it's no longer there. Probably have to click on it now and maybe they'll tell you what it means. Ab, father, and Slum, peace. Father of peace. A son of David. And these some freaky son of bitches, because he had sexual relations with his mother, And it says just down here below this, when his son Asia become the king, his mama was also his grandma, Mocha, the daughter of the father of Islam. And so if this sounds freaky to you, it's because you just a sheep, and none of this has to do with anybody on the planet. This all has to do with the gods in the heavens. None of the writings here are about people on earth. It's all about happenings in the heavens. And they like to think that he banished the male shrine prostitutes. And so, if you have male prostitutes, well, the women got no money. They must be giving it up to homosexuality. Homosexuality was deep in the Church of Islam, of David. And they remove them because, it's why over? Who's over? I'm over it, OVR. I had enough. And who over the fetish? So you look into fetish and you can get a better time of when this happened. Fetish was this old Egyptian temple prostitute. You see, it's the Kodesh, the holy. They'll interpret that in the Hebrew, the fetish or the Kodesh. Goddess who was incorporated in the ancient Egyptian religion. Likely developed her name based on the Semitic root, the QDS, the Hebrew fetish. And you can see here in the name, the hand is the D or the T, the fetish. Hard to determine due to a lack of direct references, was removed. But her epithets, that's what's written at the foot of the statue. That means her stance, what she stands for. And her epithets include Mistress of all the gods, Lady of the stars of heaven. So you can tell the people interpreting the Bible, they're looking at the pictures and trying to figure out what it means. They can't read it. But anybody with common sense could see that she stands to lie on. Not always so truthful. And so, why over? Who over the fetish of men? M and the second one I-N, men. That was the big black dude with the heart on. The fetish of men hears. And they removed all the idols that made his fathers, that they created. And the rest of all these acts of Asia and all his might and all that he did and the cities he built are not. They didn't want to write about this. And it actually says they were removed. They are not they written in the book of the words, the debris, destroyed. And so this story of Noah, in the Hebrew it's the story of Ness, N-H-S. And it's the same as the serpent in the garden was Ness. And Ness is the chicken hatcher. And so this is a story of in the father change on. And it's time for a new father. This coming from the ancient Greek word meaning whoever won the fight. To apatra association. The one that's going to get on top. And a top rose upon. And the uke, he's the one on the bottom. He's the one that has the move performed on him. The passive or submissive male fiction character in a same-sex relationship. A bottom. The one to bend. The one bent. Bent, that's the word for your daughter, bent. Womanhood. A vagina. And you'll find that stashed in the word for house where it says let him dwell. Kata is under. And the O-I reads the U, a U-K-E, the uke. The under uke, the one who's getting screwed. The kata ukes it to. But you'll see this is the base word for house. The one getting inhabited. So this is marking the end of the age of Gemini. The story of Adam, it starts in Gemini, and they were naked and were not ashamed. And it's now moving into the age of Brahma, the bull, Abraham. Then Moses, you see him always pictured with the ram's horns. This was the age of Moses. Jesus is the Pisces, the fish. And this is where we're at now, at the tail end of the fish and moving into the age of Aquarius. So, happy Arbors Day. And everybody go get you a beer. And I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.